participant.
Hello and welcome to this first panel here at WAN-IFRA, and we've had such an interesting first keynote speaker. I think the opening session has really given us much to think about, and I think this panel is, as Mr. G. Rupa pointed out, is going to give us some of the tools really to put things into a more Indian prism, a more Indian perspective. I'm Suhasini Haider. I'm the diplomatic editor and the national editor of the Hindu newspaper. Prior to this, I worked for an Indian television channel, CNN IBN, where I was a foreign editor and a primetime anchor, and saw up close the kind of challenges the television news business in India was already facing. Before that, for a period of about a decade, I worked for CNN International. From both what were called the glory years, where CNN International was growing at the television network was growing at a massive pace, and then into the areas where there wasn't as much international news, and they had to restructure a lot. I've worked in all three of these parts of the business. But our guests today, and I'm going to introduce them to you, could not be more perfect for the discussion we're going to have, which is on future-proofing the media business, particularly given the coronavirus pandemic. The old theory was that no news is good news, because after all, for the news media business, every story, no matter how dramatic, no matter how tragic, was actually something that brought readers, viewers to those news platforms. But the pandemic really changed that, because it affected every part of the news business as well. It wasn't just the news business was no longer just a fly on the wall or somebody who was witnessing what was happening. It was a part of it. Journalists were a part of it. It affected news gathering. It affected news production, news distribution. And of course, it has had its impact, as Mr. Roper's PowerPoint presentation really showed you. It has had its impact of a different kind, not necessarily bad or good, on revenue and circulation as well. Now, we're still in the middle of the pandemic, but this is a good time really to take a good hard look at the future of the news media, what it will look like, based on what we already know. So we're going to start today very quickly with our three speakers, and then move into a discussion. And I do hope there are going to be lots of questions and answers, because if you don't ask those questions, I'm certainly going to have a lot of my own. Our speakers today are Mr. Mohit Jain, the Executive Director and Board Member of Bennett Coleman and Company Limited, BCCL. Of course, all of us know it as the Times Group. He's the Executive Director of Supply Chain, and he heads 5 major functions: distribution, production, business, commercial, modernization, and H&S. So he can give you a 360-degree view of really what we are looking at. Our next guest is someone I know well, who's a dear colleague, El Navneet. He's the CEO of the Hindu. And prior to this, Navneet worked in Mindshare in Jakarta. He was the leader of trading between March 2016 and 2019. But he came back to the Hindu group in June 2019. And remember, he did serve with the Hindu between 1998 to 2006. So he has seen the business not just 360, but from bottom to up as well. He was in advertising and marketing at the time. Welcome to both of you. And our third speaker, Jayant Mammon Matthew, the executive editor and director of Malayalam Manorama in India, of course, one of the most widely read groups. He's the executive editor and director of the group, and they, of course, have a significant presence in print, television, radio, as well as online. And Mr. Matthew was the president of the Indian Newspaper Society for the year 2018 as well. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Jain, if I could, and ask you to give us a sense of really where you see the business being hit the most, affected the most by the pandemic, and where you see the opportunities for tackling the future challenges that will come with it. Mr. Jain.
Thank you, Suhasini. Thank you very much. And this is indeed a very illustrious panel. And I'm not sure whether I measure up very well with Jayant and Navneet. They have had very long innings in their own careers, and the depth that they command in the space of news. But the two specific questions that you asked, Suhasini, one is, of course, you know what hit us the most in the pandemic, and what are the challenges that we have, and the future, thereof. So, I mean, the last year, we really want to perhaps write it off from our, memories. But it had so much of challenge that I think it really, comes to our mind and again. And we wonder sometimes that how could we land up in such a situation I mean, we've been talking about resilience, we've been talking about habit, and we've been talking about the right of way. But what is it that crippled us so badly? And I think one thing which comes to my mind is actually fake news. I mean, the center of everything in this entire crippling of our business and the non-availability of the newspaper to people in the last year of pandemic has actually been the fake news. And the fake news very craftily spread by the social media at the time to say that the newspapers, you know, have a possibility of creating an infection, which I think we had realized that through the study of INMA, through the study of the WHO, there was no evidence at all, and so I think this just tells us in a very brutal manner that what is the potency of fake information or misinformation that can be spread very widely, and so much so that the people who've been reading the newspaper for years and decades can actually drop off that habit. So this, I think, was our biggest challenge that had come up in the last year. Apart from certainly that there was an economic distress, there was a psychological distress, there were a paralysis in the administration of the city for the physical products to reach out to their destinations, to their readers, to consumers. And while I would say the government was very sympathetic to us in terms of listing the newspapers as a part of the essential items, along with the other areas that are, I think, deemed fit in that case. So that was a help, but I think nonetheless, it is
Did we lose
the
the
fake news.
audio there?
Are you able to hear us, Swasni?
Um,
Yeah, I think Swasni, what I hear, Navneet and Jayant are able to hear. So I will continue then, right? So I think this is something which I felt was really at the center of it, and I mean, are you able to hear me, Swasini? Because
we can hear.
We can hear.
Mr. Jain, can you hear us?
yes, of course, I can hear. I can hear. Right. Okay. Sure. No, I think we have to live with these, small interruptions, right, in the virtual world, right? So I think I would say clearly, Swasini, that was really the center part of the challenge last year, and there were other issues related to the administrative, challenges because of lockdown, the paralysis, the disruption of the supply chain, just not in India but at a global level, and the resumption of supplies, the flight of talent, the downsizing of the business to realign itself in terms of the new realities. So I think it was a very painful year for people, not just for the news media, but I think if you look at certain other industries like the hotel, the travel, and the other parts of economic strata, I think they were probably even more hard hit than us. So I think that's about the last year, and the challenges that we see going forward are is that how do we rebuild this business, because it's not something that if it drops, it comes back at the open of a tap. We need to build it back by building that assurance in the people. First of all, I think in terms of the safety of the product, and secondly, in terms of the relevance of the product, because there is, in this period, there are people who have tried to experiment with the alternate formats, and some people will evaluate continuously in terms of their opinion and their preferences. But I'm happy to say that for all of us, and I can speak for, let's say, on behalf of Jan, kindly for yourself and Navneet, a very very large part of our business has actually come back in a very short period of time. And I know in Kerala, the people had come back to the level of 95 to almost 100%. And I think this is something which also tells us that how people dismiss the fake news once they realize what is the truth behind it. And uh, and I think the most important thing for us, what I find, Suhasini, in terms of the topic that we talk about, the future proofing the news media. Actually, I would say this is really related to the core of our business, which is about human curiosity. I mean, we are in the business, I would say, of satisfying or satiating the human curiosity. I mean, human beings are curious people. I mean, we want to know. We have a natural desire to know what is happening around us, in our neighborhood, in our city, in our country, right? In the places where our people are living. We want to know what's happening in politics, in sports, in fitness, food, technology, art, interesting places, in the world to visit. I mean, we want to know more and more about it, So I would say that, in that context, somewhere the news media is already future proof, I mean, it's like food. I mean, people will say whether food will have a future, as long as there is a hunger, right? People will like to eat Similarly, I think if there is a curiosity in our minds to know more about, the world around us, the neighborhood around us, there will be, there will be a need for that. I think the important area over here is perhaps, I think if we understand what is behind the news, and I think that perhaps Suhasini comes back to you a little bit more directly. I think it is about the journalism part, right? People may say that content is free, but journalism is not. And I'm a business person, not a journalist, but what I understand during my 18 years with Bennett Coleman is that, and what I understand from my colleagues here is that, see, journalism is really about that, production and distribution of a subject or a content. But essentially behind that, it is something which is well researched. It has evidence of proof, right? So I think that is very very important. So the three pillars that I've understood behind that are really the thoroughness, accuracy, and fairness. And if we have those kind of a tenets which are supporting it, so obviously the content which we are trying to put forward for our readers to consume, they will find it interesting. And there are four areas also which I understand in journalism, which really centers around. I mean, one is that the type of the people who are great storytellers, right? And who doesn't want to listen to a great story, right? And there are people through that medium who will connect with other people of common interest, and then there are people who really deep down into the facts and data, which are called news hound. They always will try to bring out new angles of the story to present it to people. And I'm sure there will be people interested. Now, I mean, there is a strife going on between Israel and Palestine. There is something going on in the South China Sea, right? I'm sure people are interested to know what's happening over there. I mean, what is the root cause? What are the pros and cons? So it just creates a natural interest. The third level is that where there are type of journalism where people are very strong authoritarians on certain subjects, who are system analysts, and they will talk about certain subjects with a great level of depth to bring out the real details, the root causes. And there is an audience who's very, very interested in that. I mean, whether it's about technology, whether it's about politics, whether it's about history, the medieval ages, whether it's medicine, and there are people who specialize in that and who will talk about these subjects with so much of an interest. I mean, that people want to, go back to their mind again, to something which is beyond a news cycle, beyond a current event. And the last is something which, is really linked to a kind of an investigative journalism, the provocateur type, people who will pose questions, who will bring, ask you questions that what if, is this it's a hypothesis. And there are people who are interested in that as well, to understand, who will bring in their own angle in that, that do you think this has happened like that, there will be many examples which I could say from the Times of India or Economic Times, but let me just quickly summarize my conversation by saying that recently I saw a great film, The Life on a Planet by David Attenborough. I mean, the way he's presented this entire thing by researching the data in that, the subject in that, and then bring it to the audience by saying that what are the mistakes that we have done in the pursuit of economic growth and how we can put it right. And so I think the whole thing makes a very, very interesting watch. So I would say that, Swasi, just to summarize that, our thing is certainly I don't think it's a question at all that whether news media is future proof or not. So as long as there is a human curiosity, I think we are there. Because just as has a future, curiosity has a future.
You basically put journalism at the center of this and said, essentially, as long as that journalism is protected, the industry and the interest in it will be protected. And certainly, those are very welcome words for anyone to hear, because eventually that's what the readers and the viewers and listeners often come to. If I could turn to you, Navneet, with some of the same questions, but specifically about the Hindus. The Hindus made this to going partially behind a paywall. The Hindus making other transitions as well. It's still in the transition phase as far as online goes. Give us a sense of what that experience of the last year has meant for your business, and do you share some of the optimism? In Mr. Roper's presentation, he said 65% of the news media business people who they spoke to actually said they are expecting business to eventually recover 100%. Give us a sense of where you think it is.
Okay. Thanks, Suhasini, and good afternoon. Hope everybody tuned in is both safe and well. I think wellness has become as important as safety. Suhasini, I put together a few slides to share my thoughts on the presentation. If I could request Vijay Lakshmi to bring the slides on. Yeah, is my presentation visible, Suhasini?
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I've tried to do is, see, we have Mohit and we have Jayant, and they have views. But I think this question is relevant to everybody in the media business. It's also relevant to others. So I tried to put a framework around which we could answer the question of future-proofing the news media business. And as part of it, I will share some of the thoughts as to where we are in this journey. To my mind, journalism is front and center of everything we do. So I put a construct of wine and bottle. There's certain old wine, there's certain new wine. Wine is the content that we produce. But there are different ways of packaging this content. You would package it in an old bottle or a new bottle. So if wine is the content we produce, a bottle is the way we package it. And to my mind, each of these have a role in future-proofing our business. Old wine and old bottle is all about increasing efficiencies. And I think COVID has taught a lot about how do we increase efficiency in our business. Then the questions of how do we enhance loyalty, how do we enhance engagement, how do we build scale. So I'll share some thoughts on each of this. If you look at our core business, the core business is of publishing. But what we need to transition is from a business of publishing to a business of content. Today, the newspaper is the dominant medium through which we disseminate our information. We also do a little bit on digital, but that needs to change significantly. Our current business is largely dependent on ad revenues. All of us seem to have a command and control style of leadership across multiple disciplines that we operate in within an organization. Largely, content and commerce teams have operated in silos. And as news organizations, we have been reporting issues and problems. I think what this needs to change, and this was changing even before COVID hit us.
Mr. Navneet?
Yeah.
Can you please reshare your slide? It's not visible for audience.
Just one sec, please. Is it visible now?
Just a minute, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So I was speaking about old bottle and old wine. So we need to work together with user at the center of the universe. If journalism is the center of everything we do, the end user is at the center of our universe. I also believe that we need to solve for problems and be part of enabling positive action. Look at our role as a media company. we essentially are in the center of the universe where we can connect various stakeholders together, and that is something unique to media. So instead of largely reporting issues and problems, I think a lot more can be done if we enable positive action and be part of the solutions. The second quadrant is old wine and new bottle, which enhances engagement. This has to do with the way we repurpose our content, the way we create new use cases for existing content, the way we curate content, also add context through archival material. And look at the people on this panel. We have got Times of India, we've got Manorama, and we've got Hindu, and all of us have heritage of over 100 years. I mean, we are 141 years. Manorama is very old. Times of India is older. What really is context? Context is the ability to make sense of what's happening today using the prism of yesterday and inform our readers the implications, the choices they make today for tomorrow. Not many people have this context, and I believe we could do a lot better in bringing this context to life, and that will certainly enhance engagement. The third quadrant is all of us have users, we have readers, we have subscribers. How do we enhance loyalty? Clearly, multimedia content, serving micro community interests, which is very difficult in the context of a newspaper. Audio and video format, some of that we have been doing. Interactive graphics and storytelling. Mohit did speak about storytelling. The final piece of the puzzle to me is how do we build scale? Today our ambition is limited largely by the markets we operate in. If you look at the model of the printed product, but the users all over the world, our view of the world is no different from what others have. I mean, if you typically ask people, what do you consume? Outside India, they would say, I consume a Guardian, I consume a New York Times, I consume an Economist. My belief is, while these are great journalistic products, we consume those products because we are interested in a worldview through an American prism or a worldview through a UK prism. My sense and optimism is that India is a large market. India will grow. India will become a net importer of white-collar talent. India will become a destination for people seeking education. And the India story will become interesting to people in the global market. And when that happens, people would be interested in the Indian view of the world. And that, I think, is a large opportunity. And this requires new revenue models and new partnerships. So in a nutshell, if we are to manage our business today effectively and build for tomorrow, one needs to look at increasing efficiency, increasing engagement, increasing scale, and increasing loyalty. My personal belief and optimism is that Indian media companies can do it. We have been on this journey. For instance, we have repivoted the subscription business. Most of our content is on a paid paywall. We are extremely encouraged by what's happened so far. And I would urge other publishers to build their business models around this. But if this is how we see the world, I think there are compelling implications for all of us. And this cuts across people in a news organization. I think we need to grapple with newer structures and ways of working for both content and commerce. We need to have greater imagination in journalism and approach to content. Our intent in journalism is unquestionable. Our approach to journalism is as good as everywhere else in the world. But my submission is we could do with a lot more imagination and our approach to content. We certainly need a collaborative approach across all functions in an organization. If journalism is front and center of what we do internally, the user needs to be front and center of what we do externally. We could do a lot more communicating with our readers, and that is possible with the digital world. We also need significant cultural changes. While I said all of us are more than 100 years old, and that gives us legacy, that gives us context, that also saddles us with ways of working. Typically, in large news organizations, one's standing is linked to pedigree and number of years of experience. That is getting challenged. We need to find ways to listen to the new 23-year-old, 24-year-old, 25-year-old, and embrace their ideas, especially in the digital world. Technology is critical to this. And finally, I believe our future, while protecting our business, while doing our business in the publishing world extremely good, our future is largely dependent on aggressively chasing new markets through digital subscriptions. So that, in a nutshell, are some of my thoughts, Vasni, and I hope I kept to time.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. And it's interesting. I was just reading a quote that said, if you are over 45 and you don't have a mentor who is under 25, then you're a relic. You know, you're not going to move very forward. Mr. Matthew, do you agree? You are also one of the three that's part of this legacy. You know, this is India's news legacy. You know, all three of you, not just that you know these are older these are all institutions for the country. And how do you see the last year having changed your thought process about future proofing, as they call it, your business in the next few years? And in particular, in the context, Mr. Jain brought out the point about how fake news became an issue, but that was a specific issue. People didn't want to take newspapers, for example. But it's a larger issue as well when he said that eventually credibility fades. And eventually you will find people looking for credible news. How do you see that debate as well?
Sure, thanks. Last year when the pandemic struck, it was almost like a tsunami to the news industry, especially newspapers. Uh, Different parts of the country were affected. In the north, probably they had a lot of distribution issues, primarily because of this fake news, which Mohit had mentioned. It became a huge problem. They solved it. They had a lot of campaigns. I think as we came down south, for some reason, we were fortunate that we had no distribution issues. But there was this whole fake news, misinformation campaign, which was going around saying that there was a video which was circulating, especially in Kerala, which said that top 20 ways you will get COVID. One, and then they had 1, 2, 3, and then right up to 20. And one of them was reading a newspaper. So all the publishers in Kerala, we worked together and we sort of had this campaign in a newspaper and on television saying that there's absolutely nothing wrong with reading a newspaper. So there was a lot of unity in this, and we worked together, and that was the only way we could get out of this fake news and misinformation campaign. So as a result, we were not affected at all in terms of distribution, and that was a huge lifeline for publishers in the south and in Kerala, because advertising had come to practically zero for a couple of months. Last year we learned a lot. We learned a lot in terms of all three of us. You could say that we are legacy companies, all 100 years old. But these days, I'm not sure whether it's a good thing to say that we're legacy. Legacy means old, slow, and on the decline. That's what's happened in the West. So I would say that we looked at our business, we looked at our operations, and we looked to see what are the areas where we could become efficient, where we could improve, keeping our journalism intact. I mean, we should remember that without quality and credible journalism, there's no newspaper, there's no TV channel, or there's no news outlet in whatever form we are. And all three of us, we stand on hundreds of years of credibility. For credibility means having quality journalism, which we put out every day, which we make sure that our readers are well informed, they get different points of view. And for this, we need more journalists on the ground, and if you need more journalists on the ground, you need revenues to make sure that your newspaper or your establishment is well funded. See, in many parts of the world now, there are, as we call, news deserts, where many cities across the world don't even have a newspaper. I mean, shocking, but that's what's happening in many parts of the world. We should not let that happen in India. Under any circumstance, we should not let any news deserts come in India. We have to invest. I feel as we move on in the coming years, newspapers need to invest in local news, because local news is an area which is probably prime for fake news and misinformation. There are so many small little sites which just peddle this from a town, from a little village, even in parts of cities. I mean, you could have something in just local news, say in Bandra, but is that authentic news? That's where credible news outlets come in. So we have to invest in journalism. Whatever cost cutting we do, we should not cut costs there, and we should ensure that our newsroom is well funded, and we have all the resources to compete going forward. Now, a newspaper, traditional newspaper, always had classifieds to give additional revenue, regular advertising. But over the years, we've seen that migrate to digital. So gone are the days when a newspaper will just survive on advertising and cover price. Navneet mentioned that they've started a partial paywall or a full paywall. That's the way to go. That's the right way to go. I think a user, a reader needs to value what content is, what we are producing every day. I think Indians are getting used to it. Most of us pay for Hotstar, we pay for Netflix, we pay for Amazon Prime, and lots of other OTTs. So we are used to paying for content. And I think every newspaper in India, if they migrate online, they should charge for content. Nothing should be free. I mean, that was the first mistake the Western newspapers made in the mid '90s. They gave everything away for free for reach, but for what? They didn't gain anything. It led to their demise. I think there are only 3 or 4 newspapers in the world which have vibrant online subscription businesses. But I think in India, we need to get there fast. We should start the process, but I think it will be a very long haul. We are not going to get lakhs of users, readers every year, because there's so much of news which is available on the internet, and our copyright laws are very lax. So people copy at will. There are these 5, 6 person news organizations which probably take from all of us, from TV channels, and that's how they survive. So I think we all migrate digitally. We look and see what are the other options. Can we have webinars? Can we have curated events? I know in some parts of the world they take people on cruises and experts, journalists talk to them. I mean, there are all kinds of things which we should explore. I don't think as legacy media we should just say no, this is the only way to do business. We have to keep our credibility intact, but without compromising that, we should look at new businesses. I just want to come and point out that these days, in a sense, technology is sort of dictating democracy. We should not let technology dictate democracy. I mean, that's very important because it impacts us as newspapers. I don't want to talk more about that because we all know what's going on in the tech world. Many parts of the world have realized that. Coming back to credibility and social media and digital media, earlier it was everybody had an opinion, but facts were sacrosanct. But now that's not the reason. That's not the case. Everybody has opinion, and everybody has their own version of facts or alternate facts. We've seen that in America, where on Jan 6th they said one party said that they stormed the Capitol, another party said that it was they didn't storm the Capitol. So this is what's going on. I think it's slowly catching on in India also. So we need to be really careful regarding that. And as credible news organizations, we should make sure that that does not happen. I'll just end with one last point. That is, as we move to the digital medium, we should sort of have our own, what do I say, our first party data strategy, in the sense that we should ensure that people, readers who come to our site, that should be our data. We should make sure that data is private as opposed to third-party data, and the other stuff which is going on online. I think that is another way where we can get increased revenue, because we will know who our readers are. That will be, we can profile them as long as we do not misuse that data. So this, in a nutshell, is, I think, some things which we should probably do. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a tough next 3 to 5 years. There's so much of uncertainty already. We don't know whether there'll be a third lockdown or not. But it's not as bad as last year. I think we all know how to manage the business better this year, and I think we're doing a much better job. Thank you.
Well, that's certainly a hopeful note, but you've given us a lot of food for thought. I have a lot of audience questions which I want to get to, but I want to very quickly get a sense from all of you about where you see the future of the news media business. And I'm just going to ask you sort of multiple choice questions, if I may, so this can move a bit quicker. To begin with, social media, Twitter, Facebook, all the social media, bane or boon, Mr. Jain?
No, it is certainly a boon in that case, because freedom of expression is something which is very fundamental to human nature. And long ago, Suhasini, I can tell you, during my engineering days, there's a debate I had participated in that, and it talked about that liberty has to be limited in order to be enjoyed. Right. So I think people say that however thin may be the coin, but it will have two sides. So I think there is no doubt that it is the boom, but I think there has to be a responsibility on the people who are conducting it, the people who are participating it, the whole ecosystem which is there, because very very quickly something which we think is our greatest strength can actually become a disadvantage.
All right.
So I think if
I'll just quickly move to Navneet. SM versus MSM, as they call it. Is social media a bane or a boon?
Navneet, we can't hear you.
Extremely useful, more than useful, it's necessary. But given the scale and the number of people with access to it, lots of evil, and hence it has become a necessary evil today.
All right. Mr. Matthew?
Well, India is a diverse country, so I think it's important that social media is used responsibly, because there's so much of misuse. We've already seen that. We've seen it during COVID times. We'll see more of it in future. So I don't know. It's a very, very it's very tough to police it, but there has to be some way where there is some responsibility.
All right. Okay. Is everybody on the same page when it comes to pay for news, make news go behind paywalls, even if you lose circulation? I'll start with you, Jacob, if I may, and then I'll go around. You are clear that even if you lose circulation, news must go behind paywalls?
Sure. I mean, Swati, is a question to me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think, Swati, I mean, that's a great question in the sense that are we expecting our consumers to pay for a quality product like it? I think undoubtedly, yes, because then only, as Jayant very rightly said, the model will become sustainable. But sometimes what happens, in any kind of a, industry or a product, you have to make sometimes investments upfront. You build up a franchise, allowed to assume a critical base, like in that case, and then afterwards, you try to, try to make it more sustainable over a long period of time. But I completely agree that there's a high quality product which has to go behind the paywall, and people must value it, and there has to be a payment for it.
All right. Now, 6 years now since the Hindu did it or started doing it.
Absolutely, yes. And one of the problems with our industry is that we have never put a high value on ourselves. And when things go for a toss, we externalize our problem, saying it's GST, it's RERA. We are responsible for the mess we are in. And partly because we don't put a high value on what we do, and you expect the world to solve your problems. In that sense, yes. But I'm also quite interested in our role as what we bring to society. Our content is important, and our content should be accessible. So ability to pay shouldn't become a detriment to accessing good quality content. A metered paywall solves for the problem fairly well. But as we go along, we need to do justice to both ends of the spectrum. You need money to fund good journalism, but you need good journalism to be accessible to many, making it meaningful. So I'm all for a paywall, but find a solution where journalism is still accessible without having to pay. If not all of it, a part of it at least.
I'll come back to that solution, but I do want to hear what you have to say, Jens, on this. I heard you say as we move to digital. You didn't say balancing print and digital. You said as we move to digital.
No, the reason I said that is it's not going to be, we're not going to announce one day, okay, we're going online and it's going to be completely pay and we're going to shut down for those who don't pay. It's going to be a gradual process, maybe a metered paywall. We don't know the model yet, but it's going to happen soon. We also have another product, an OTT, which is premium content is paid, but a lot of the stuff is free. But for premium movies, we make the viewer pay. So, I mean, I'm all for a healthy cover price, even for newspapers, which, I'm sure Mohit might differ from, but I think newspapers in India are underpriced, and we should look at our neighbors in Sri Lanka. They're, I think, thrice the cover price is 3 times our cover price.
To pay for that as well. Okay, I have one possible solution which I'm going to put to all of you. The idea that if I buy newspapers, I just pay my newspaper man once a month. If I buy entertainment content, I just go to my OTT and they aggregate it from everywhere. If I want a television, I go to my cable wala or I go to the larger cable guys. But if I want to get online newspapers, I have to go to each of you separately. So do you see the future in competition, or is there scope for cooperation coming onto platforms in order to do this? I'm going to put it first to you, Mohit, because of course Times of India is known as the king of cutthroat competition.
I'm not sure, Swasni, whether we enjoy this, accolade that you've given, but nonetheless, let me answer this. It's a great question, I must say, Swasni, first of all, and more so, from a journalist, right? And see, I think the aggregation of the distribution business today, it was not something which was born out of choice, I think it is more about an industry practice where there were obvious synergies in doing so. It is one of the most competitive, low cost distribution method which was being done. And what I understand that when newspaper was invented about 400 years ago, people tried to keep it a very low cost. They did not even put a staple inside it, I mean, they said that it's not about what is it printed on. It is just about what is getting printed in it. I think that's important. So the model of distribution of newspapers where there are common people who are doing it is because of the legacy reason, and the digital part is because the technology is enabling them to do a more personalized reach out to the subscribers, and clearly both have different reasons for that, because one is technology enabled and the other is not. So the differentiation is really born out of technology, and there is no other reason for that, right?
Okay, Navneet, you have thoughts?
I think it's a brilliant question, and it's a question I've given a lot of thought to. And my response is, when it comes to markets like India, all our brands are well known. People have experienced us in some form or the other. You go to markets where we don't publish also, it's not that we're not known. So people make informed choices. I think the larger opportunity for future-proofing our business comes from engaging with the non-diaspora. So how do we get global audiences to consume us when their awareness of the Indian media scene is not great? The solution there probably is to create a credible India package, which is a sort of a destination for anybody across the globe who's conversant with India, but not necessarily with Indian media. I think the way forward is cooperation in that sense, where I can see 15, 20 titles getting together with a single sign-in and a password for global audiences. Good place to start with and see where it goes.
There are some possibilities. Jen, do you think there is space for cooperation over competition when you're trying to future-proof the news business, which is being attacked from every end?
Sure, I think in the physical form, there can be a lot of synergies, but in the digital area, we are already seeing a lot of news aggregators. But the problem with news aggregation is the particular news aggregator, then people only go to that news aggregator and they make all the money, they get all the advertising, while all our brands get diluted. So that's why even in my opening comments, I said that we should make sure that people come to our individual brands. That's the only way how we can get out of this grip of the Google ecosystem and make advertising come straight to us, and we have quality data.
The three different perspectives over there. Now, I have a lot of audience questions, and I think the organizers really want me to go to them. So I'm going to start by asking Mohit. You've been asked by Abhijit. Can you please elaborate on the idea of time verified? Is that something that's working? Really, fake news is something that has bothered you.
No, certainly. Swasni, the WAN as an organization has been holding this award for many, many years called the Golden Pen Award. And I've participated myself in several of these award ceremonies. And what's the purpose of these? The purpose of that is really to celebrate the top quality journalism. The content which we are putting out is properly curated, authenticated, and certified. So we also want to explicitly talk about it, that whether we are onto the journey, whether we are respecting the accuracy of the content, and how we can sharply contrast ourselves, with the question that you asked, whether social media is a bane or a boon. It could be either, depending upon the level of inaccuracy or misinformation in that case. And then what's the purpose it is used for, because the purpose of a content is really to spread, the positivity with the people with the right accuracy of information.
Credibility is everything. Question to you, Jen, from Neha Sikri. What do you do about the fact that digital subscribers mostly come from tier 1 cities that you're not yet attacking, or at least being able to reach tier 2 and 3 towns and make people pay for good content online? Is there a way forward, Neha?
Is the question for me?
It's for you, Jen. Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that's. I think it's also has to deal with promotions. People in cities are the first one to migrate to digital. They have more access, and I think this we've seen across the country during the pandemic as well. So I think as connectivity improves and there are more schemes, this will move to tier 2 and tier 3 and even the smaller towns.
Yeah, and 5G could change everything.
Absolutely.
In terms of thinking. Navneet, Kareem Al-Walid is asking, according to you, which content is good to drive digital subscriptions in particular? Because almost everyone is just into breaking news, being first and that sort of thing. And you had another question asking about, for scale, where do you look in digital subscriptions? Is this going to be the big next opportunity for all publishers?
Yeah, I think the way it works for an advertiser-led business and a subscription-led business is different. Because in an ad-led business, you still would go for optimizing eyeballs. Our own experience on digital subscription is when so much of news is available and so much of it is anyway free. And there are quite a few trusted players in the marketplace. And among the three of us, our approach to subscription business currently is very different. It could all converge later. What I found is that people pay for news because news is by and large parity. I mean, the value you add to news is verification. So if your views are valued and people see merit in that, and if it furthers the agenda of what you believe in, which is to solve for inequalities in every space, and if that resonates with your reader, they would pay. Plain news will not get you people to open their their purses. But differentiated views, well-meaning views that are important will do that. And the second question is of scale. Scale really comes from expanding into markets where we don't operate in the physical world, because I don't think any of us are in a hurry to set up a plant that will print 500,000 copies anytime in the near future. We are not looking at capex and opex in that range. But from a cost point of view, it's easy to serve players digitally. So there is potential to look at new markets. There's potential in language as well. If algorithms become intelligent enough to not just transliterate but really translate, you will find scale in offering these services across the world.
So that's important. One area for scale is going to be languages, and India couldn't be richer in terms of offering those opportunities. My final question to all of you is going to be, Jen mentioned that technology cannot dictate democracy. I'm going to turn that on its head and ask about the impact of government. In the old days, the idea was, when the government of the day seemed to want to, in some way, send a message to the newsprint, news business, it would come by with the cost of newsprint, or taxes on newsprint, or levies on newsprint. Today, we see the government trying at least to, in some way, regulate news content online with this new law that has now been contested in court as well. How do you see this basically playing out? Because on the one hand, the government has made it clear it is doing what it thinks in the interest of fighting fake news. So my question to all of you is going to be, is the fight against fake news going to have a chilling effect on what all of your businesses do online? Jen, do you want to start?
Sure. I think the new rules, there's a lot written about it in the past couple of weeks. A lot of organizations have gone to court regarding this. But I think fundamentally, I just want to make it as simple as possible. As newspapers, I mean, there's the Hindu, Times of India, and us. We are sort of governed by, press council, and in many ways, we are sort of self-regulated. Tomorrow, if someone has an issue with something which we've published, the reader has every right to question us, has a right to complain, and has a right to go to take it to court. But in the new rules, what's draconian is the level 3 part of it, which says that content can be removed based on certain parameters, certain guidelines, and I think that is dangerous. That is dangerous because if we all have common newsrooms, even for our digital sites, it's from the same newsrooms, it's almost the same journalists. So if our newspaper, it goes through the same fact-checking, credible process, why is it that on digital we are subject to this? And I think that's unfair, and I think that the third part should be dropped, and the government should definitely have a rethink towards that. That is on one side, but when I was saying that technology sort of dictates democracy, I was talking about big tech, and that's a bigger danger, and it's happening all over the world. It's slowly creeping in. I mean, in every sort of part of our lives, they are there, and I think that is something the government really needs to look at. Not only government, but even civil society.
All right, Mohit, your thoughts on government on the one hand clamping down on fake news and online content, on the other hand facing this challenge from big tech?
See, I think, Swasni, there is no doubt that the freedom of expression and speech, which is guaranteed in the Constitution under the fundamental rights, right? There is no, I think, doubt about that. Everybody wants to protect it like it. So I think this is what the publishers and the news community is talking about it like But at the same time, the menace of fake news, which is propped up and quite ferociously, there has to be a mechanism to curb it and that certainly has to happen and we are all for it. because largely I think the questions are really emanating not so much from the newspapers, but I think more from the social media, and the big tech, as Jayant has really rightly alluded to that part. So, and I think it is very different area of technology, and how we can put in a map to control that part is important. But at the same time, we should not put in additional curb the freedom of expression. I think that is very important. That is the fourth pillar of democracy. That's the conscience keeper. We should have the necessary code of ethics which are there for us. I think we should work around it. We should be fine. And I think that's the common opinion all of us have.
All right, Navneet.
Yeah, I not much to add in addition to what Jayant and Mohit stated, but while I believe technology is an enabler and we should use it, my problem with technology is slightly more philosophical. And look at what big tech does in the terms of recommending algorithms. You consume some content, you get feeds, and the big problem we have today is we live in an extremely polarized world, and people don't seem to be consuming plurality of views. Maturity comes from consuming counterpoint of views and other views, and then debating and accommodating views. What algorithms have done is you consume a particular kind of view, and the algorithm ensures that you are fed with that diet day in day out. So it feeds off existing polarization. It contributes massively to polarization. Uh, in my view, if you look at, the world was never this polarized 8-10 years ago. It is increasing every day. Tech has had a big role to contribute to this in discouraging or disincentivizing people from consuming plurality of views. That, I think, is a larger problem we need to solve. Whether it's society has to solve it, tech has to solve it, or governments have to solve it, I don't really know. But this is a question that really bothers me.
Right. Certainly, very, very interesting thoughts. And I have to say, I thought I would actually move away from this particular panel feeling a little worried about the future of the news media. But in fact, I have to say, despite the losses you will suffer, despite the uncertainty that you're all facing, if leaders like you continue to put journalism, content, a plurality of views really at the front and center of the news media business, then we really do have every reason to be optimistic. And I'm going to just end this session on these thoughts. Vijayalakshmi, I'll hand it over to you now. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very much, all the panelists, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's